Pet Sematary, directed by Kevin Kölsch and Dennis Widmyer, is the latest Stephen King adaptation film and is a remake of the 1989 film of the same name. This iteration takes place in modern-day Maine and follows a family of 4 that moves out to a remote house in the woods. This family quickly realizes that something weird is going on in their new neighborhood, though. There's an area nearby where things are mysteriously coming back to life, and they have to figure out why and how to handle it. As things get stranger, this family tries to figure out how to resolve some very strange problems. Alright, so I actually went into Pet Sematary hoping for something above par for the horror genre. I like that it comes from Stephen King's source material, even though many of his stories are great, but they aren't always adapted to film very well. But nonetheless, I hope we'd get, the next It. Sadly, we don't. I mean, this film is alright, it's certainly passable if you're just looking for some scares, but there's not much more to it than that. It is sad, really, because I definitely felt that the foundation for telling a great story and a unique story was there, but nothing about the lore of it all is explored in enough detail to really matter all that much. The characters aren't interesting either, the lore and the threats aren't explored in enough detail, like I mentioned, and it really just feels generic, even boring at times. I will say, though, the performances are one of the better aspects of the film. Jason Clarke does a good job with what he has to work with here, as does the other actors like John Lithgow and Jete Laurence, who plays the daughter, who I've never seen before, but she was good. The mom was good too. I felt like the foundation was there to make this movie pretty good, because there are some surrounding parts that work nicely. It's just that the script isn't anything new, and it's not that well written and executed for that matter, and because of that, it just feels like every other horror film you've seen in the past 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of jump scares, sometimes unnecessarily, like with trucks going by on the road, and similar things that just don't need jump scares. Still, the movie does do a pretty good job at building tension and then revealing the scary layer underneath. Sometimes predictably, like a lot of horror films, but it does mostly work overall. So if you're just looking for scares and you really don't care all that much about the story and the characters, or even the lore for that matter, then Pet Sematary may be a solid choice for you if you're just looking for a, kind of one-off horror experience at the theater. I think most of us, though, are going to want more out of our horror films. This is a very generic, superficial brand of horror, and it isn't going, in my opinion, to make most people feel as if they got their money's worth. I will say, just for the record, that I have not seen the original, so I'm not able to really compare this one with the original in 1989, but what I can say is that I think the filmmakers do make an effort to try to modernize this one as much as possible, sometimes to negative effect with things like the jump scares, but I think they do tone down a few of the characters in order to make them come across as less hokey, I'd say. But it does feel like they're trying to at least offer something different from the original, even if ever so slightly. I do appreciate that. I appreciate them trying to take some creative liberties here and not just offer a beat-for-beat remake that would inevitably prove boring for people that have seen the original. Still, though, I really do wish that they went more into the lore, because it's hard to really understand too much of the threat and what it entails without the audience gaining a better understanding of its history and all that. Ambiguity does work for some films, especially horror films. Some it doesn't. Here it didn't work for me because I feel like the stakes don't feel as realized as they should, because it's hard to know too much about what the threat is and what it wants. I also understand the argument, and we know, that we know what the characters know, and their knowledge is limited, and because of that, that's what we know. I get that, but if you elect to go that route, sometimes the lack of clarity can be unsatisfying for the viewer, and that's how I felt here. So about the characters are fine, they're serviceable, but there's not any real depth to them. These feel like the kind of characters you'd get in a movie like Ouija Origin of Evil or Annabelle Creation or something along those lines, which aren't bad films, but they don't offer great characters, if you know what I mean. There's some interesting themes explored in this movie, but these characters have very little personality to actually explore them. And without characters you can connect with, an experience like this can feel bland and somewhat uninspired unless the other aspects of the film pick up the slack, which they don't really. If this movie were insanely scary, I'd probably be more willing to overlook something like that, but it's not. It definitely is scary when it wants to be, but the movie puts a lot of stock in these characters and spends a lot of time with them. It just doesn't really work effectively with that time. But overall, I was pretty disappointed by Pet Sematary. It has some things to like, but I think it will probably blend in with the rest of these type of, one-off horror movies that you'll never watch again. As for the pros, cons, for the pros, I thought the acting performances were all good, and the film is tense and scary when it wants to be. As for the cons, the characters aren't fleshed out enough, the lore isn't fleshed out enough, and much of the film feels very familiar and generic. I'm going to give Pet Sematary a 6.5 out of 10 and recommend you pass on this one in theaters. If you really want to see it, I'd say just wait for it to come out on Blu-ray or digital later on. So if you happen to go see Pet Sematary, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you're not interested in seeing it, let me know why not. And finally, let me know your favorite Stephen King horror adaptation. Horror though, so nothing like Shawshank Redemption can be used here. It's got to be horror. For me, it's a tie between It, the 2017 version, and The Shining. Make sure to let me know yours in the comments below though. I'd love to hear what you guys think. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.